There comes a time when silence begins to speak louder than any voice. A time when a person who once walked proudly through life suddenly feels an invisible weight pressing against the heart. That is the beginning of conscience awakening. The narcissist, who once believed they could control every story and every soul, now finds themselves haunted by a voice they cannot silence. It is not the voice of man, nor of memory. It is the whisper of divine justice, echoing within the soul. The book of Proverbs chapter 16 verse 5 says, "Everyone who is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. The proud may rise high for a season, but pride always writes its own downfall. When conscience begins to speak, it strips away the illusions they built around themselves. Suddenly, every lie feels heavy. Every manipulation echoes back with the sound of guilt. Before we begin this journey, it is a blessing to know from which part of the world you are watching and at what hour of the day God has guided you to this message. Truly, it is a joy to witness how the Lord gathers hearts from every corner of the earth, uniting them in one spirit and in one truth. They start to notice the small things they once ignored, the sleepless nights, the anxious thoughts, the faces they hurt without care. The smile that once looked confident now hides fear. Pride becomes fragile when faced with the light of truth. And though they may not confess their guilt to others, they can no longer hide it from the one who sees the heart. There is no running from the spirit. The narcissist who believed in their power to deceive finds themselves trapped in the same web they spun for others. The peace they once faked has vanished, replaced by a restless mind. Isaiah chapter 57 verse 21 declares, "There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked, and this truth cannot be escaped." When conscience awakens, it does not shout, it whispers. But that whisper grows louder each night. It questions every choice, every motive, every wound they caused. The proud may try to drown it out with distractions or pleasure, but no noise can silence the inner cry of guilt once it has been stirred by heaven. And so the torment begins, not as punishment from man, but as revelation from above. They are not just haunted by what they did, they are haunted by who they became. The mirror no longer flatters them, the silence no longer comforts them. Conscience, once ignored, has now become their judge. And it will not rest until they face the truth they buried beneath arrogance. Yet the first whisper of conscience is never the end. The proud never imagine that one day their own reflection will become their accuser. Yet the time always comes when the mirror no longer flatters but reveals. The narcissist, once surrounded by admiration, applause, and control, now finds every reflection unsettling. It is not the glass that has changed, it is their soul that can no longer hide what it has become. The book of James chapter 1 verse 23 and 24 says, "For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was." This is the story of the guilty soul. They once saw their reflection through the eyes of vanity. They believed their own lies, decorating their pride with charm. But now, the mirror tells the truth. Every glance into it brings discomfort. Their eyes no longer carry confidence but unease. The face they see reminds them of every word spoken to deceive, every heart broken without remorse. They begin to feel the same emptiness they once caused in others. The mask they wore so proudly begins to crack, and behind it lies a truth too painful to accept, that their beauty, their success, their power, all were built on the suffering of others. When conscience takes over, even the smallest reminder becomes a mirror. The sound of a familiar song, the sight of a place once shared, or even a memory buried long ago, each becomes a reflection of the damage done. Guilt follows them like a shadow that will not leave, even under the brightest sun. In those moments, they are reminded of Numbers chapter 32, verse 23. Be sure your sin will find you out. They used to mock such verses, believing themselves untouchable. But now, the truth of those words burns inside them. The reflection they once admired now carries the weight of every false word, every cruel act, every moment of arrogance. The narcissist's greatest punishment is not public shame, it is private realization. The silence in the mirror is louder than any accusation. They try to escape it, turning off the lights, avoiding their own reflection. Yet even in darkness, the image remains burned into the mind. The proud once loved their own reflection because it obeyed them, but now the reflection refuses to agree. It exposes, it confronts, it reveals. And so, the mirror becomes the first instrument of divine justice, showing them that the face they once adored is no longer a source of pride but a reminder of corruption. Every glance becomes a sermon. Every reflection becomes judgment. The soul that once sought admiration is now forced to see the truth, and the truth does not flatter, it humbles. For mirrors never lie when heaven holds them up. There comes a night when fear replaces pride. It does not arrive with thunder or fire, but slips quietly into the heart. What begins as unease soon becomes a storm that never rests. The narcissist, once confident and unshaken, now trembles beneath invisible chains. These chains are made not of iron, but of fear and shame. The twin guards of the guilty soul. The book of Job chapter 18 verse 7 says, "The steps of his strength shall be straightened, and his own counsel shall cast him down." The very mind that once plotted control now becomes its own trap. Every thought turns against them. Every memory becomes a wall. They cannot escape what they have done, for fear has become their prison. Fear is cruel. It steals sleep, silences laughter, and replaces joy with suspicion. The narcissist begins to imagine that every glance hides judgment, every silence hides rejection. They cannot explain it, but deep inside, they feel pursued. What they once dismissed as superstition now feels real, the spiritual weight of consequences. Shame follows them like a shadow that refuses to leave even in the brightest hour. At first, they try to fight it. They cover fear with pride and hide shame beneath arrogance. They pretend to smile, to talk, to plan. But their laughter sounds hollow, and even their own voice betrays them. Deep inside, they know something has shifted. What was once confidence is now trembling. What was once control is now panic. Fear changes how they see the world. What once looked beautiful now feels hostile. What once felt safe now feels cursed. They begin to question why peace is gone. They do not understand that Psalm chapter 32 verse 3 and 4 already foretold their torment. When I kept silence, my bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long. For day and night thy hand was heavy upon me. This is the hand of divine correction, not to destroy, but to reveal. Shame becomes the teacher they never wanted. Every place that once made them proud now reminds them of their fall. The fear they feel is not of man. It is the fear of being truly seen that they begin to dread solitude. Yet they also dread company. For when others speak of kindness, they remember their cruelty. When others show love, they feel the sting of their own emptiness. Fear now walks beside them, whispering in every quiet moment, "You cannot escape truth." And shame, that silent companion, wraps itself around their heart like fog, blurring their sense of right and wrong, but never removing the guilt. The same pride that once protected them now becomes the wall that keeps them captive. This is the invisible prison. No bars, no guards, yet impossible to flee. It is the cell built by conscience, sealed by memory, and guarded by fear. Fear will soon give birth to torment. There are punishments that no human court can give. The most painful of them all is memory, when it becomes a living thing that refuses to rest. What once seemed buried begins to rise again, piece by piece, face by face, word by word. The narcissist, who once believed the past was behind them, now realizes that heaven never forgets what the heart refuses to confess. The book of Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 declares, "Be not deceived. God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." They sowed deceit and manipulation, but now they reap remembrance. The very moments they once twisted for control return as witnesses against them. Memory becomes their judge. At first, it begins quietly. A dream here, a sudden thought there. But soon, the memories arrive uninvited, day and night. Every detail they once ignored becomes vivid. The tone of their voice when they lied, the tears they caused but never cared to see, the trust they shattered without mercy. It all replays like a film directed by divine justice. They try to push it away. They distract themselves with work, pleasure, or noise. Yet when the distractions fade, memory remains. It has a voice now, calm, relentless, undeniable. The narcissist begins to feel as though someone else is writing inside their mind, reminding them of every wound they created. They cannot delete it, for these are not ordinary memories. They are lessons written by heaven. Psalm chapter 94 verse 11 says, "The Lord knows the thoughts of man, that they are vanity." He allows memory to become the mirror of the soul, so that even the proud must face the truth. And so, the narcissist begins to realize that they are not haunted by ghosts from the past. They are haunted by their own heart. Every memory has weight. It presses down upon them until even breathing feels heavy. Their joy fades, their appetite disappears, and the night feels endless. The laughter of others irritates them because it reminds them of the peace they once destroyed. Their mind becomes both their punishment and their teacher. There is no running from memory, because it does not live outside, it lives within. It follows them through every season, speaking in silence, shouting in stillness. It tells them what they once denied, that every action has a cost, and every sin writes its own echo. This is divine justice, not always loud, but always fair. The narcissist learns that what was once done in arrogance will be remembered in agony. Memory holds them captive until they admit what they have become. And yet, this weight of memory is only the beginning. For when remembrance meets divine power, it no longer just reminds, it reveals. But memory is only the first step toward divine justice. There is a justice that moves quietly, unseen by human eyes, yet its footsteps are sure and steady. It does not arrive in anger, but in order. The narcissist, who once thought they could bend truth to their will, now begins to learn that heaven keeps perfect records. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing escapes the attention of the one who weighs every motive and measures every deed. The book of Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 14 declares, "For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." This truth is not spoken to frighten the heart, but to remind it that divine justice is not delayed, only patient. What the narcissist believed was escape was only postponement. The hidden hand of justice was already moving, preparing the lessons they would one day be forced to live through. This justice does not always arrive through punishment. Sometimes it comes through loss, the slow unraveling of the illusions that once gave them pride. The friends who once praised them begin to turn away. The opportunities they took for granted start to disappear. Even the very confidence they used to intimidate others begins to fade. What they built on deceit begins to crumble, not all at once, but piece by piece. It is as if heaven itself begins to rewrite their story. The stage they once ruled grows silent, and the applause they once demanded turns into echoes of emptiness. They begin to understand that what they called victory was never blessed, and what they called success was built on sand. Every lie they told becomes a seed, and those seeds now grow into thorns. There is no comfort in their wealth or power anymore. These things once made them feel untouchable, but now they offer no protection. The peace they pretended to have has vanished, and the mask they wore feels heavy and suffocating. The hand of justice does not destroy them violently. It exposes them slowly. It allows them to feel every consequence of their actions until they realize that no one escapes divine order. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 12 says, "The righteous one observes the house of the wicked. He throws the wicked down to ruin." The narcissist begins to feel that ruin not as a sudden fall, but as a slow decay from within. Every false foundation they built starts to shake. Their plans, once so clever, begin to backfire. Their relationships become strained. The charm they used to manipulate others loses its power. This is divine balance in motion, silent, exact, and just. It is not the cruelty of revenge, but the mercy of correction. For even in their downfall, heaven offers them a final lesson, that power without humility leads only to emptiness. And deception, no matter how polished, cannot stand against eternal truth. When the hidden hand of justice moves, there is no sound, yet everything changes. The proud begin to bow, the false begin to fade, and the soul that once mocked truth is now forced to face it. And in that moment, the guilty heart finally understands that the most painful punishment is not death or exposure, it is the loss of peace. There comes a quiet moment, often in the middle of the night, when even the most hardened heart begins to tremble. The noise of the world fades, and only the voice within remains. That voice is conscience, the sacred messenger that cannot be silenced. It speaks softly, yet its words pierce deeper than any sword. The narcissist who once silenced others now finds themselves unable to silence this voice. The book of Romans, chapter 2, verse 15 says, "They show that the work of the law is written in their hearts, their conscience is also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them." The law of conscience is divine handwriting inside every soul. It cannot be erased by pride, nor rewritten by excuses. It speaks truth even when the heart refuses to listen. At first, The narcissist tries to dismiss it. They tell themselves it is only stress, only imagination, only coincidence. But conscience has patience. It waits. It speaks again. It turns their thoughts in circles until they are forced to face what they have done. Their own mind becomes the battlefield between pride and surrender. Every attempt to justify themselves only deepens their guilt. Sometimes, the message comes in strange ways, through a song that echoes a forgotten memory, through a verse that appears in a moment of weakness, through the look of a stranger that feels like recognition. The spirit uses everything to remind them that truth cannot be buried. Even an unsent message, written then deleted, becomes part of the lesson. It is as though heaven is whispering, "You can no longer hide from yourself." They begin to think of the people they wronged, the words they said that cannot be taken back, the moments they destroyed for the sake of control. Guilt becomes a constant companion. They may reach for the phone to make things right but stop halfway, paralyzed by pride. Even that hesitation becomes its own sermon, a reminder that pride always stands between a soul and peace. Psalm chapter 51 verse 3 declares, "For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me." This is the reality of the guilty soul. They can pretend in public, they can smile before others, but in private, they cannot escape the message written upon their heart. Every sleepless night is a reminder that silence from heaven is not absence. It is warning. The message of conscience is not cruelty. It is mercy wrapped in discomfort. It is heaven's way of saying, there is still time to repent before the harvest comes. But to the narcissist, repentance feels like defeat. Their pride cannot bear to kneel. So instead of confessing, they suffer in secret, trapped between conviction and rebellion. And yet, the message will not fade. It echoes through their thoughts, follows them into their dreams, and wakes them in the still hours of the morning. It is not anger that pursues them. It is love trying to reach through the walls they built. For conscience is not the enemy. It is the voice of salvation still trying to call them home. There comes a night when the mask finally slips, not before others, but before the mirror. The room is silent, the air heavy, and sleep refuses to come. Every memory, every name, every word they once used to break another now returns, echoing louder than the darkness around them. The bed that once brought comfort becomes a place of unrest, a battlefield of thoughts. This is the night when the narcissist realizes that control means nothing when peace is gone. They can no longer command their thoughts or dictate their dreams. The mind they once used to manipulate others now turns against them. The same imagination that built lies begins to replay the truth over and over. Without mercy, the book of Job chapter 7 verse 13 says, "When I think my bed will comfort me and my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions." Such are the nights of the unrepentant soul. What they once thought was victory becomes torment. Every face they hurt seems to appear in their mind's eye. Every false word spoken rings again in their ears. They may toss and turn, blaming stress or exhaustion, but deep inside they know it is not the body that is weary, it is the soul. For the peace they destroyed in others has now been taken from them. No amount of wealth, pleasure, or distraction can quiet the storm. It is not insomnia they suffer from, but conviction. Some try to fight it. They turn on the television, scroll through endless screens, play music, just loud enough to drown the thoughts. Yet when the noise fades, the silence grows stronger. The Spirit of Truth does not need volume to be heard. It speaks in stillness, reminding them of the one truth they can no longer avoid, that guilt unconfessed is judgment waiting. They remember how easily they once fell asleep while others cried because of their cruelty. They remember how proud they felt watching someone beg for mercy. But now the roles are reversed. Their own heart begs for mercy, and the only answer is silence. The tables have turned, not by human hands, but by divine order. In that long night, they may even cry quietly, not from sorrow for others, but from the fear of being found out, from the shame of being unable to control the pain within. But even that moment, painful as it is grace. It is the beginning of what could become repentance. Because before the soul bends, it must break. The book of Psalm chapter 32 verse 3 says, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long." This is the slow decay of unspoken guilt. The longer they refuse to face the truth, the heavier the weight becomes. It seeps into their thoughts, their health, their spirit, and so they lie awake in the darkness, unable to rest, haunted not by ghosts, but by memory, by conscience, by truth, by everything they once ignored. And somewhere in the stillness of that endless night, heaven waits, watching, hoping they will finally whisper the one word that breaks the curse: forgive. Every word they once spoke now returns, not as a casual memory, but as evidence against their own soul. The narcissist begins to realize that words have weight, that every insult, every lie, every manipulation leaves a permanent mark. The echoes of conversations they once dismissed as trivial now feel like chains around their conscience. The book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 36 warns, "But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken." The words they used to tear others down were never empty. Heaven has remembered them all. The ones meant to humiliate, to dominate, to belittle, now serve as silent witnesses to the truth. They try to reason with themselves, crafting mental excuses for the things they said and did. Perhaps it was stress, perhaps it was the fault of someone else, perhaps the world did not understand. But every justification begins to crumble because the Spirit of Truth will not allow the soul to hide. Every word, no matter how small, becomes a mirror reflecting pride, cruelty, and the absence of mercy. Messages once sent with arrogance, emails typed with contempt, conversations laced with mockery, all return in the mind's eye like shadows that cannot be dispelled. They see the pain inflicted in subtle glances, in harsh tones, in silences that wounded deeper than words ever could. The weight of these moments presses down, slow and unrelenting. James chapter 3 verse 5-6 says, "The tongue is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the course of their life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." The narcissist finally understands this truth firsthand. Their own tongue, once a weapon to control and deceive, has created a fire that now consumes them. From within, it is not just the words that cause torment, but the absence of truth they ignored. The kindness they dismissed, the patience they scorned, the love they corrupted. All of these now rise as a silent indictment. Every blessing they mocked now feels like a rebuke. Every moment of grace they scorned, now a standard they cannot reach. even when they attempt distraction. Even when they force a smile in public, every interaction reminds them of the emptiness behind their pride. A phrase overheard in a conversation, a compliment given to another, a moment of genuine kindness they witness, all of it reflects what they rejected. The weight of every word is heavy because they are finally forced to measure it against truth, against justice, against the quiet power of love that cannot be silenced. The narcissist learns, often painfully, that the cost of careless words is measured not by the moment they were spoken, but by the lifetime of echoes they leave behind. In this slow reckoning, pride no longer protects, deception no longer shields, and silence no longer comforts. Every word becomes a seed of awareness, and the harvest is a soul that trembles under the weight of its own actions. Memory is a persistent teacher. For the narcissist, the past does not fade, it returns, vivid and unavoidable. Each person they have hurt becomes a ghost in their mind, appearing not in anger, but in the quiet judgment of truth. Faces that were once ignored or mocked now demand recognition. Words that were dismissed now demand understanding. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 1 reminds, "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come." This verse carries more weight than they realized. They were given opportunities to honor others, to walk with humility, to choose mercy, and yet they chose pride instead. Now, the Creator remembers for them, and memory becomes their teacher, relentless and precise. Every forgotten kindness they rejected resurfaces. The friend they dismissed, the spouse they betrayed, the subordinate they belittled, all now exist in their conscience like silent judges. The narcissist cannot escape these ghosts. Even in moments of laughter or fleeting pleasure, the shadow of what they destroyed lingers. Each memory feels like a mirror held up to their soul, reflecting the truth they once refused to see. They may try to distract themselves, filling life with activity, noise, and superficial relationships. Yet in stillness, the ghosts return. They sit quietly in a room, and suddenly the laughter of someone they wronged echoes in their mind. They smell a scent that brings back a forgotten moment of kindness. They hear a phrase that once brought comfort to another, now cutting through their defenses. Memory becomes unyielding because God's justice does not rush, it unfolds patiently, carefully, fully. The narcissist begins to understand a deeper principle. Every broken heart carries a voice, and heaven does not allow that voice to be ignored. Every tear that was cried, every silent prayer that was offered, every act of patience they scorned, now bears witness. The weight of these recollections grows heavier with each passing day, until silence can no longer soothe the soul. There is no violence in these ghosts, only revelation. They do not punish with fire or noise, but with clarity. They show what was lost, what was taken, and what could have been honored. The narcissist experiences the slow unraveling of illusions, as every memory becomes a lesson in humility. Every ghost a reminder of the true cost of pride. In the end, the ghosts are not merely reminders of guilt. They are instruments of transformation. Heaven allows them to see, feel, and remember in order to awaken what remains within them. The pain is undeniable, yet it is not without purpose. Through memory, the heart that once refused truth begins to tremble, to question, and perhaps to bend. This is the moment when the past, long ignored, becomes the doorway to the present and future. When the ghosts speak, They are not seeking revenge. They are a summons to accountability, a call to recognize the eternal principle that what is done in pride cannot stand before the light of truth. Asterisk. The narcissist now confronts the hardest reflection of all, not in the eyes of others, but in the mirror of their own conscience. For years, pride served as armor, deception as shield, and manipulation as sword. Now, all of it fails. The mirror does not lie. Every choice, every cruelty, every missed opportunity for mercy stares back. Unflinching. Romans chapter 14 verse 12 says, "So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God." The narcissist feels this truth pressing down on them. They no longer see the world as an extension of themselves. They see it as it is, and in that clarity, they witness the weight of their own wrongdoing. Every injustice they inflicted is now a burden they must carry, not as punishment from others, but as natural consequence. Every word used to dominate or humiliate now returns as a quiet, persistent echo. Every false smile, every hollow apology, every moment of pride is visible in this reflection. The narcissist realizes that the love they rejected was never weak, it was sacred. And the pride that once brought them comfort now feels like a prison, trapping them in the undeniable awareness of what they have destroyed. Even the smallest acts of kindness they once overlooked now blaze with power. They remember the patience shown to them, the prayers offered on their behalf, the grace extended when none was deserved. And in the mirror of conscience, these acts pierce through the pretense, exposing the emptiness behind the mask. Sleep becomes a stranger. The mind revisits every conversation, every betrayal, every moment they dismissed as trivial. They may attempt to write apologies, but words fail them. The weight of truth is heavier than any sentence they could type. The mirror does not negotiate. It does not accept excuses. It reflects only what truly exists in the soul. In this reflection, they begin to grasp something terrifying and yet transformative. They cannot hide from what God already knows. Every secret thought, every manipulative intention, every act of selfishness has been witnessed. And now, in the stillness of conscience, they finally see that divine justice does not require spectacle. It operates quietly, through awareness, through memory, through the relentless illumination of truth. The narcissist begins to sense that the path forward cannot involve manipulation or pride. They cannot erase the past, but they must confront it. The mirror does not mock, it teaches. It demands acknowledgement. It asks one question with profound simplicity. Will you recognize what you have done, and will you allow this recognition to change you? This is the threshold of awakening. The reflection is painful because it is accurate, because it reveals what has been lost, and because it illuminates the way forward through humility, through repentance, and through the understanding that love, once rejected, still holds the power to awaken the soul. Asterisk. Silence can be heavier than any scream. For the narcissist, the absence of validation, applause, or control is deafening. Every moment of quiet is not emptiness, it is a voice, a message delivered through stillness, carrying the weight of judgment and reflection. The silence surrounds them, pressing close, and in it, they cannot hide. Isaiah chapter 30 verse 15 reminds, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." The narcissist experiences this truth in reverse. Without repentance, without surrender, the quiet becomes unbearable. They are forced to face themselves, to feel the weight of actions they once dismissed as insignificant. Each moment of stillness amplifies the echoes of their past. Every conversation they avoided, every apology they delayed, every mercy they refused, now manifests as a ghost in the room. The quiet does not accuse with noise, it convicts with presence. It asks questions their pride cannot answer and exposes truths their ego cannot deny. The narcissist realizes that silence is not empty. It is God's instrument of reckoning, a space where conscience speaks louder than words ever could. In the quiet, they remember the trust they betrayed, the faith they mocked, and the love they used as a stepping stone for pride. The faces of those they wounded appear not in anger, but in quiet remembrance. Every kindness ignored, every patience scorned, every prayer dismissed rises to meet them in this stillness. And each memory lands with undeniable clarity, revealing what was taken and what was lost. They may try to fill the silence with distractions, with people, with work, but the stillness returns. It waits, it does not tire. It does not forgive until the heart does. The narcissist feels a restlessness deeper than the body, a fatigue heavier than the mind, because the soul itself is being called to account. Psalm chapter 46 verse 10 declares, "Be still and know that I am God." In this moment, stillness is the mirror of divine awareness. The narcissist experiences the terror of being truly seen, not by others, but by God. And in this seeing, there is no escape, no manipulation, no argument, only recognition. The silence exposes what the heart has refused to acknowledge, and the conscience becomes unavoidable. Through this quiet, the soul begins to confront the questions it cannot ignore. What have I done? Who have I hurt? What love did I destroy by my own hand? Each unanswered question is a weight pressing against pride, a subtle force guiding the soul toward acknowledgement and, eventually, surrender. The silence is not cruelty. It is education. It teaches the depth of wrongdoing, the power of mercy, and the cost of arrogance. And as they wrestle with the stillness, a fragile understanding begins to emerge. It is in the quiet that the soul begins to feel the first tremors of humility, the first stirrings of remorse, and the realization that true freedom cannot exist without reckoning. There comes a moment when guilt no longer whispers, when pride can no longer shield, and the narcissist feels a trembling in their spirit that cannot be ignored. It is subtle at first, like a vibration beneath the surface, but it grows stronger with every memory, every reflection, every silent acknowledgement of what has been done. The soul shakes, not with fear of man, but with fear of truth. Proverbs chapter 28 verse 13 tells us, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." The narcissist experiences this principle in a raw and unrelenting way. They recognize that every act of concealment, every deception, every manipulation was a step away from mercy. And now, in the trembling, the soul knows that avoidance is no longer an option. The trembling is not only fear, it is a call. It is the spirit's way of demanding attention, of shaking the ego until the heart is forced to listen. They feel the weight of every insult they delivered, every moment of scorn, every quiet cruelty that was once invisible. Each memory lands like a stone, pressing deeper, forcing the soul to reckon with its own emptiness. Even their attempts to distract themselves, to return to normal routines, fail. Their thoughts drift back, unbidden, to the moments they mistreated others, to the times they dismissed love, to the silence they imposed on those who only sought connection. These recollections are relentless because the spirit will not allow the soul to remain comfortable in delusion. The trembling is accompanied by a growing awareness of something greater than human judgment. It is the realization that every action exists in the presence of God, and no manipulation can change that truth. They feel it in the pit of their stomach, in the tightening of their chest, in the restlessness that sleep cannot calm. It is a sacred discomfort, a mercy disguised as suffering. In the shaking, awareness expands. They begin to see patterns of pride, cruelty, and arrogance that were invisible when fueled by ego. They recall every act of grace they spurned, every moment of patience they ignored, every word of love they misused. Each memory pierces, each recollection humbles. The soul begins to understand the cost of every choice, and the heaviness grows because awareness is never without responsibility. This trembling, though frightening, is the first step toward transformation. It is the recognition that guilt is not merely an emotion but an invitation. The narcissist begins to sense that mercy is available, that acknowledgement can lead to change, and that surrender is the only path to release. They feel the weight of all they have done, but they also glimpse the possibility that the soul can be repaired if truth is met with humility. And in this trembling, the heart begins to ask the question it has avoided for so long. Will it yield, or will pride continue to resist? The answer will determine whether the soul remains captive to guilt or begins the journey toward redemption. The spirit does not demand perfection. It demands honesty, recognition, and willingness to bend. Guilt is heavier than iron, and for the narcissist, it binds like invisible chains. Every action, every word spoken in arrogance, every manipulation they once wielded as power now returns as a silent weight. They cannot touch it, cannot see it with human eyes, yet its presence is undeniable. The heart feels imprisoned, the mind restless, and the soul restless beyond sleep. Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 warns, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." The narcissist experiences this truth with a precision they cannot evade. Every slight, every lie, every disregard for another's dignity has returned to them in this quiet, inescapable gravity. The chains are forged by memory, by conscience, and by the quiet intervention of divine justice. These chains are not meant to humiliate. They are meant to awaken. Every movement the narcissist makes is restrained by the weight of truth, every thought shadowed by reflection. Sleep offers no escape. Meals provide no comfort. Conversation brings no relief. The chains follow silently, reminding them that power built on pride is fragile and fleeting, while love and mercy endure. Even in their attempts to seek distraction, to escape the weight, the chains tighten. They sense the absence of control as punishment, though it is not retribution from others. It is the natural consequence of misused authority, of hearts broken in arrogance, of trust abused. Every smile they once received with manipulation now comes to mock their emptiness. Every word of kindness once ignored now pierces them with clarity. The narcissist may try to rewrite the past in their mind, to rationalize, to soften, or to blame. Yet the chains are incorruptible. They are formed not from vengeance but from truth, and truth cannot be altered. The spirit ensures that every memory they tried to bury surfaces with undeniable weight, minding them to the reality of their choices, and as the chains tighten, a quiet lesson emerges. Power and dominance offer no immunity from consequence. Pride may shield for a time, but eventually, humility becomes unavoidable. The narcissist begins to recognize that their freedom was never real, that every relationship they manipulated, every kindness they exploited, every moment of love they dismissed was a thread in a web that now binds them. The invisible chains are heavy, yet within them lies opportunity. Awareness and recognition are the first steps toward release. The soul may still resist, clinging to ego, clinging to pride, but the spirit's purpose is relentless. The weight of guilt teaches that surrender is not weakness. It is the only path toward restoration. Each chain is a reminder that God's justice is not loud but certain, not quick but complete. They cannot escape it, and in that realization, the soul trembles. The narcissist begins to feel that mercy is within reach, but only if pride finally loosens its grip. Only when the chains are acknowledged can the heart begin to bend. And only then does the possibility of freedom appear. Asterisk, the narcissist reaches a point where the weight of guilt, the trembling of conscience, and the chains of past wrongs converge. It is a crossroads, not marked by signs or voices, but by the undeniable presence of awareness. Here, the soul is forced to choose, continue in pride and remain trapped, or surrender and step toward transformation. James chapter 4 verse 10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." At this threshold, humility is no longer optional. Every memory, every silent reflection, every pang of conscience points toward surrender. The narcissist feels the pull of what has been lost, the trust betrayed, the love ignored, the grace dismissed, and in that awareness, the first seeds of change begin to grow. The crossroads is not comfortable. Pride resists with every fiber of being. It whispers excuses, justifications, and rationalizations. It tempts the soul to flee back into distraction, to mask the trembling with arrogance. Yet the spirit is patient, persistent, and unyielding. The soul can feel the tension between defiance and submission, between the desire to preserve ego and the need for reconciliation. The weight of guilt has become unbearable precisely to reveal this moment. It is heavy enough to make pride painful, sharp enough to make avoidance impossible, and persistent enough to demand recognition. The narcissist begins to sense that surrender is not a defeat but a necessity, a passage through which true relief, true clarity, and true restoration can be found. In this sacred tension, the soul sees the cost of every action. They remember the kindness they scorned, the patience they exploited, the love they dismissed. These memories no longer bring prideful justification. They bring understanding, remorse, and the realization that transformation requires acknowledgement of truth. To bend the knee is not simply to confess, it is to recognize the depth of what has been done and the magnitude of what has been lost. This is where change begins. Not in words alone, not in superficial gestures, but in the heart's quiet submission to truth. The narcissist may tremble, hesitate, and falter, yet the spirit continues to guide. The crossroads demands courage of a different kind, the courage to face oneself fully, to accept the consequences of choices, and to allow the weight of guilt to reshape the soul. It is here, in this space of confrontation, that the possibility of redemption exists. The soul understands that mercy is offered not because pride deserves it, but because God's justice seeks restoration over ruin. And even in the midst of fear, trembling, and regret, a faint glimmer of hope appears, the hope that acknowledgement can lead to change, that surrender can open the door to grace, and that guilt, when faced honestly, can become the seed of a new beginning. The crossroads of surrender is not the end of the story. It is the turning point, the moment when the soul chooses to step into truth, allowing awareness to guide the heart toward repair. And in that choice, the narcissist stands at the threshold of mercy, confronting the fullness of what they have done and the possibility of who they might yet become. Asterisk, there is a silence after the storm, a stillness that follows the weight of guilt and the tremors of conscience. The narcissist, once proud and unyielding, now stands in this quiet with a heart exposed. The lessons have been taught, the memories relived, the chains of pride loosened. In this sacred stillness, a subtle transformation begins, though it is neither loud nor dramatic. It is gentle, patient, and entirely internal. Isaiah chapter 57 verse 15 reminds us, "For thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, and also with him who is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite." Here, in the aftermath of reckoning, the contrite spirit is given room to breathe. The narcissist begins to sense that the very weight that once crushed them is the instrument of restoration, preparing the soul for awareness, humility, and ultimately, mercy. This is not a sudden absolution. The heart remains heavy with memory, remorse, and the recognition of what has been lost. Yet within the heaviness lies clarity. The narcissist begins to see the difference between manipulation and truth, between control and genuine connection, between pride and reverent humility. Every past action is now viewed through a lens of consequence, teaching the soul lessons that arrogance could never have offered. The realization that love is not possession but reverence begins to settle. The kindness once rejected is recognized not as weakness but as the highest form of strength. The patience, the prayer, and the enduring grace extended by others are now seen as testimonies, reminders of the divine order that governs human hearts. Understanding comes slowly, but it is profound. Mercy and justice are not opposites. They are partners, weaving the fabric of redemption and restoration. In this quiet, a subtle willingness emerges. The narcissist may feel trembling, uncertainty, and fear, but they also feel the pull toward acknowledgement, confession, and change. The past cannot be undone, but it can instruct. What once was prideful defiance now bends toward contemplation. What once sought to dominate now seeks to understand. And in that bending, the heart begins to open to a hope previously denied. This quiet redemption is not about external validation or human approval. It is the soul's intimate recognition of truth, the moment when awareness meets surrender, and the spirit's patient guidance is finally heard. The narcissist may still falter, may still hesitate, but they now stand at the threshold where guilt becomes transformation, where remorse becomes awakening, and where the heart may finally learn the weight and the value of humility. There is a strange tenderness in this final awakening. God has not abandoned the proud. He has guided them through memory, conscience, and reflection to the very edge of surrender. And in this sacred process, those who were wounded are now lifted. Grace, once ignored, now permeates the soul, revealing the truth that every act of God's justice is also an act of mercy. The scales of life balance quietly, the proud humbled, the contrite heart revived, and in that quiet, the soul realizes the journey was never only about punishment. It was about restoration, revelation, and the subtle, unyielding power of divine truth. Guilt has served its purpose, not to destroy, but to instruct. Remembrance has opened the door to understanding. Silence has revealed the depth of consequence. And in the stillness, the soul, at last, trembles not only with regret, but with the faintest whisper of redemption.